This is Babble. I'm Megan Thomas, and today I'll be chatting with Ameer. She is a poet whose poems have been published across many online and print journals, and her debut collection, Inhale Exile, published by Seren Books, is out now and tells stories from Iraq. Hi, Abeer, how are you?
Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm good, thank you.
It's good to have you here. And where are you based today? Where am I speaking to you from?
Cardiff.
Cardiff, wonderful. And so I'd love to start by chatting to you about this kind of journey to poetry. So you're a dentist. Am I right in thinking you're still a dentist?
In spirit. Yeah, I don't practice clinical dentistry anymore. But yes, I trained as a dentist, and I did a master's in conscious sedation in dentistry, which is treating anxious patients.
Okay.
And I haven't worked for a while. I retired.
Plenty of time then to focus on your poetry.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Where did the poetry start? Were you still working on other stuff when you started?
Actually, the reason I left dentistry was I became quite ill in the middle of doing my master's. So I'd finished the clinical part of my master's, and I was writing a dissertation. So it changed the focus of the dissertation to include mindfulness as a way of addressing anxiety, dental anxiety. And at the time as well, I did some mindfulness courses and and some counseling courses as well. So part of that included writing a reflective practice. So I'm not really a great essay writer. So what I found was it was quite nice to just explore things through poetry. So the homework that I kept sending was poems rather than actually, I feel this or all that kind of thing. So that's how it started, really.
Right. And so I understand you were also part of someone who we previously had on Babble, Christina Thatcher. You were part of her writers group. Was that there in the early stages, or had you already kind of established that you wanted to write poetry when you joined this?
Well, I actually met Christina before that. There was a different class that was the first creative writing class I'd attended, actually, and it was Christina and Emma Bynon, and together it was I think a community project. So that was really great. That it was the first time I'd done anything like that, and so then after that finished and we produced an anthology, then I thought, well, actually Christina's really good. Let's see what else I can join. So Growth Writers was there as well.
And do you think that kind of poetry, or not even poetry, just writing communities and circles and things like that are important to you as a writer?
Certainly in the early days it was very important, just in terms of prompts, because I didn't know what to write about, really. It was usually things that were going on in my life at the time that I'd write about, but certainly with the workshops and the kind of writing groups that Christina ran, she'd introduce poems as well, which I probably wouldn't have come across otherwise, to be honest. And I think more than writing groups, actually people that are supportive are really important in the writing process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you said about prompts is so interesting, because I did a creative writing degree, and I found that people often ask, did they teach you to write? Which is annoying, and not necessarily something you can answer. But what it does teach you is just that discipline to write. It teaches you to sit down with a prompt and just do it. And it's such a useful thing in the beginning, especially if you don't really know where to start or what's important enough to write about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, prompts are really useful, and also I guess it encourages you to think about something in a different way. If especially with the other poems that we read, as I said, I wouldn't have come across them otherwise. But it was kind of seeing things from a different point of view, and that was really useful as opposed to just.
Well, that's so interesting you say that, because one of the big themes in your books that in your book that I really admire is how you've taken a similar experience in the sense that it's the same context, time, place. Kind of time may vary a bit, but ultimately the experiences are so different because they're so perspective based. And is this something that you found your writing circles around, is perspective?
That's a good question. I think it's quite a combination of factors that helped me imagine things from a different point of view. So even when I was a dentist and I was, part of the helping overcoming dental anxiety, part of it is to actually take a good history and to kind of find out what it is exactly that is the issue. It's not what the dentist says, it's what the patient says is the issue. So that was really helpful actually in kind of seeing things from another point of view in that sense. So I guess it just carried on. When I think about particular characters, I'd imagine their point of view and their experience at that time. So
I'd love to talk to you a bit more now about kind of the theme of Islamic art and Iraqi culture specifically in your debut. And you talk about Iraqi immigrants in Britain, as well as those still in Iraq, and the kind of immense violence and hardship being experienced there, and the really tricky social dynamic arriving in Britain. And it seems like your poetry does rely on those themes. And so you're born in Sunderland, I think I read, and raised in Cardiff. And so was it important to you to get these this kind of route across?
Well, the stories are very much a kind of a family history. Although I haven't said who is who in the book, the things that are going on in Iraq at the time were things that were on my mind, because as I was growing up, there was the first Gulf War. Before that, there was the Iran-Iraq War. And then things continued. So even though I was here, my heart and mind, I guess, were always there as well. So it was really just part of the process of unraveling it all, I guess. I had to write about both places simultaneously because that's how it happened.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to see how you use things like food, for instance, to kind of imagine up feelings and experiences. And food is something that could be so nostalgic, especially when writing. You kind of get all the smells going and then you can sit down and be creative with it. Was this something that kind of comes naturally because it's an important part of your life and your experience, or is it something you felt like you were kind of inserting into the poetry?
I think food is
such
a big part of such a big part of a culture as well. And because I although I was born in Sunderland, I actually grew up in Middlesbrough for the first 8 years before we came to Cardiff. And at that time, the kind of I remember my grandparents were able to visit. That was before they stopped. Before they stopped travel from Iraq to the UK. So, I remember my grandparents coming, and they brought this thing called date syrup, which we didn't have in Middlesbrough, certainly. We have it now in Cardiff, in City Road, particularly. But we didn't have that stuff at the time, and so it was such a treat. So yeah, food is really important. Yeah, there's lots of things. Most recently, my husband grew up in Iraq, and so there are foods that he used to like growing up that I hadn't really come across. So Iraqi pickle is a marriage thing that I hadn't really.
that comes up a couple of times.
yeah, it does. Yeah. So.
Okay, and so then I also read on your publisher's website that you consider yourself to be very shy. So firstly, sorry for making you come on a camera and talk to me.
Yes. It's kind of counterintuitive because I sort of run, but yeah, I am.
Yeah, it's something that's really fascinating to me because it does seem like it's actually a bit of a recurring theme amongst writers. They find that they can be completely themselves and happy and content in their heads, and then actually reading something out loud or being in a public situation that's actually quite stressful. And perhaps it's because writers have become so good at writing down how they feel and curating what they're feeling that suddenly when you're put on the pressure to feel it live, it has a bit of a different feel.
Yes.
But, so my question is, do you find that you write poetry for kind of your internal self, or is it something you do enjoy reading out loud and sharing?
I that's a good question as well. And I wouldn't say that I enjoy reading it out loud because but I guess I enjoy sharing, especially if I get kind of nice feedback. That's a really nice thing, and it makes the the palpitations worth it. When I write poetry, when I write poems, like when I was writing for the book, I knew that it was going to be shared, and so even though there are many things that are kind of that I understand really well, I found that I did need to at times explain or elaborate a bit so that the reader would understand as well. So in that sense, I did write some things with the reader in mind, but when I started, I mean, the first poem of this book, I wasn't intent to share it at all. So that was just for me to kind of make sense of some things, and eventually, it grew, and I thought, well, I'd better share these actually.
Yeah. And so is that the process? Did you have a few books and then start looking for a publisher and then write the rest to have a book? Or were you writing a lot of them with the book in mind?
When I started writing, I didn't have any thought of actually publishing a book. It wasn't something that I thought at all. But like I did sometimes put some old poems on Facebook, which I cringe about now because they're a bit embarrassing, in the first stage when you start writing. But I was told actually by Emma Bynan and Christina Thatcher that, the way to kind of progress, I guess, is to send your work out. And so I started sending my work out to magazines, and I was still writing at the time, and I found that actually I had enough poems to make that followed a particular theme to consider a publisher. And I just had a conversation with Amy Wack, and she said, "Send me your poems," and I did, and that was it.
That's
so
a
I was really lucky
journey when it comes to publication.
Yeah, well, yes, it was. I mean, not all the poems that I initially sent to her are the ones that are in the book, and there are quite a few new ones, kind of quite late on actually that made it to the book, and then others were taken out. But essentially, it was the same theme and the same kind of idea.
Right, and so then I'd really one of my favorite poems from Inhale Exile is Iraqi Bride in Transit.
Yes.
A combination of, because it kind of really encompasses the dual conversations you're having with the reader, but also because I just love a punchline. I was wondering if you'd be willing to read it for our audience.
Sure, okay. Iraqi Bride in Transit. She's 19, waits in Charles de Gaulle Airport, unsure where to go. She hopes that groom comes for her soon. Her first experience of a plane journey hasn't been ooh la la. Far from her Baghdad home, her white suit is not so white now. It's the first time she wears high heels. She has blisters, struggles to balance. She wears her mother's fur coat, a white headscarf. White clutch bag holds her green passport. Feels bare without her abaya. Groom waits in Heathrow arrivals. It's the 23rd of December 1974. 3 flights have arrived from Paris in the last 8 hours. No sign of her. Iraqi Christians who boarded the same plane from Baghdad, waiting for their New York flight, recognize she's the bride. Take her to the gate. Last flight before Christmas. He is pupil. He drew drugs. She rolls her R's. Groom's lost hope. It's late. He gets up, ready to leave Heathrow, gathers coins to make the international call. What will he tell her father? Announcement. Groom is summoned to immigration. Your wife says you do drugs. He realizes at that moment he should have taught his bride the correct English term for pharmacy student.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
Thank
and
you.
a really lovely note for us to end on. Thank you for chatting to me today. It's been really lovely to hear about your process and a bit about your debut collection. I thoroughly recommend that everybody listening to this go and read Abeer's poems. And you have an example now of why you should do that. And like and subscribe and review and do all those fun things. And we'll chat to you again next time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.